Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us here today. So my name is Steve Pastor, run the sales team out of the East region for Braze. We are a customer experience platform designed on the premise of engagement across all of your first-party channels, taking in data from websites, mobile apps, other first-party data that you have, designed for the cookieless world to help you personalize experiences at the right time on the right channel to the right people. So I'm excited for this conversation here with Laura. Thanks for joining us. VP of Customer Experience. Love to learn more about who Georgia Pacific is. We already heard a little bit about Brawny and Dixie and all that, but anything else you want to fill in that we didn't hear before, and then share a little bit more about your role?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Yes, you heard a little bit from Paris earlier about Georgia Pacific. We are a leading wood and paper products company headquartered here in Atlanta. We have 3 divisions, building products. So you might be most familiar with kind of driving down the road, seeing construction and seeing the kind of GP logo on some side of some buildings. We have a packaging group, and then we have consumer products, which Paris and I work in. And our consumer products, we are in household essential categories like bath tissue, paper towels, paper plates, napkins, cups, and you heard about some of the brands we have, and we are in 75 million households around the country. So pretty well known across most of our branded business. And consumer experience, the group I lead, we are the kind of consumer experience and marketing capability. We support all of our brand teams in achieving their brand objectives. So I have all of the capabilities within this group. So everything from brand strategy and content, integrated media and digital, omni-channel shopper, which Paris leads, consumer affairs, data-driven marketing, as well as MarTech and some other capability kind of enablers. So we are, really about making sure that we're delivering across the consumer experience, delivering the brand experience we want consumers to have.
So you've got Brawny paper towels and Dixie cups. I think about putting food on a plate or spilling something and cleaning up. Why does consumer experience matter to a company as yours?
Yes, I think consumer experience has to matter to everybody. I think more often it really started in things like hospitality or restaurants, service industries where you had all these different touch points with consumers. But when you think about how, the world is changing, we're all in here talking about how much is new and different. That's why innovation is important. Technology is rapidly evolving, how consumers is shopping is changing, how media consumption habits of consumers is changing. The number of sheer touch points a consumer can have with your brand has proliferated. So if we are not being more deliberate and holistic in 1, what our brands stand for, and then 2, making sure that that is what the consumers experience across everything we do, then we will continue to lose consumers. And while it like I said, it seems more intuitive in some industries, the same thing is for a Brawny paper towel. If you see, all you hear about is Brawny strength, and you hear about kind of the lumberjack, and then you have a horrible experience with a paper towel that falls apart, or you call our consumer affairs line, or you go onto, the social site for Brawny, and that's not the experience you're getting. People don't think about paper towels that much. So if we are not being absolutely consistent with what our brands are, that disconnect is going to cause them to, question their choice and maybe go easily to another choice. So I would say in a lower engagement categories, which sometimes people think bath tissue is less engaging, this is even more important that you don't give the consumers a reason to doubt why they should be buying your brand.
So you mentioned about new channels and more touch points with your customer. We'd love to know how you see innovation, how you handle innovation in your role and at your company.
Yeah, so innovation is in the DNA of what we do at Georgia Pacific. We have guiding principles called principle-based management, and at the core of those guiding principles is the expectation that every employee at Georgia Pacific is a principled entrepreneur, which means every day we should all be challenging the status quo, identifying if there's opportunities to create new solutions, because if we are not creating new solutions, if we are not creating better ways to do things, someone else is out there to do that. So don't wait for that to happen. Be the one who's creatively destructing your own environment so that you can stay ahead of the game. And in doing that, once you identify kind of new solutions, then test and learn. And I think someone said it, but kind of you want to test and fail fast, or test and kind of drive forward as quickly as possible. So I have people on the team with innovation in their title. I have content innovation. I have digital innovation. I have some product innovation. But it is actually in the responsibility of every single person at the company or in my team to be looking at ways to create and do what they do differently and to either be more efficient or be more effective at what they're doing.
So along those lines, we were talking about some of the newer initiatives that you have going on, and a topic came up that we started riffing on for probably longer than we had scheduled to chat, which was DEI and inclusive marketing. We'd love to hear a little bit more about that for the room.
Absolutely. So this is, this is something that's really important for us from a focus standpoint. And like anything, there's not an absolute answer about how we can go be better about inclusive marketing or how to make it more effective in our organization. So this is an area, I would call it, of innovation for us. We are trying to make sure that we are respecting and acknowledging the diversity of our consumer base. And, there's been so much, out in the world about how our consumer base is changing, especially when you look at Gen Z and some of the younger generations. Our consumers expect themselves, they expect their friends, their family, the community to show up in the brands that they choose. They want to see it in the brand advertising. They want to see it in the brand values. And when you do that, again, that can be a disconnect with their experience when they don't have that. So it is a really important part of consumer experience. And so we want to make sure we're being much more deliberate and focused about how do we show up and be more inclusive in our marketing across our brands.
So once you acknowledge that that was something that you want to take on, how do you approach the opportunity? How do you go about actually working on that?
Yeah, this is something that it's so important, but it also feels really intimidating because you don't want to get it wrong, and you're worried a misstep can become something that can be bad. But but for us, it was really important to have that focus and to take that first step. And we started by having to just establish a current state and being really clear and intellectually honest on where we were at the moment. And we actually started with, I would say, inclusive marketing from a gender perspective. And we partnered with the ANA. They have a group within them called See Her. And See Her has created something called the Gender Equality Measure. And this is helping you identify if you have bias, and particularly gender bias, in your advertising or your marketing. And so the first step we took was we did an assessment of advertising for the past 3 years. And that was going to be kind of our fact-based approach to, hey, where are we and where do we really need to improve? And the scores came back average. And so that was like, okay, all right, we're not horrible. This is, not too bad. But then once you started peeling back the layers, you realized, well, we had brands who were doing really good and we had brands who were doing not that great. And so we did have a problem because we didn't have a consistent way to train this, to build it into how we were actually going to do marketing moving forward. And so we needed to have a more focused systemic approach. And having that fact-based assessment, just being able to lay it out for everybody, the good and the bad, this is where we are, was what was able to really rally the organization around the fact that we had an opportunity and we needed to focus on this and have the resources to be able to go work on it.
So once you have that feedback and you've allocated the resources, how do you scale that up? Because you mentioned gender, but there's a whole number of layers that are there, a whole number of brands that you're responsible with. How do you bring that to market at size?
Yes. So again, we started with, we tried to take this as an iterative approach, but we knew to make any change at all, it had to be built into our processes. We couldn't make this an and. Go do your creative and then go think about this. It had to be built in. So we started to build in tools within our creative briefs and how we were writing our briefs. We had tools within our creative evaluation criteria that really helped to prompt and keep unconscious bias top of mind. We had things within our production guidelines. Again, nothing we did was dictating you have to do this or this, but it was just making sure that you were keeping top of mind, is this what your consumer would want? Is this how your consumer would think? Are you, how do you really challenge some biases that we may have? We built it in by asking our brand teams to go get more diverse feedback whenever they were getting feedback. And so by building it into the processes, it made it something that was much more organic and natural than this forced, you have to go think about this separately. And then the second key thing is you have to have a way to measure or assess how you're doing. That's the only way you're going to make progress. I think for any innovation is, hey, is this helping to achieve the objectives or the hypotheses we sent out? And so we continue to leverage the GEM measure, but we have we have questions built into our qualitative feedback. We have it built into our quantitative kind of copy and creative testing now, so that we can look and say, hey, are we consistently kind of delivering at the levels that we would expect? And with that, we've started to see the themes. We have brands with very different positionings, very different tonalities, very different equities. And so how they bring those things to life could look very, very different. But we know, particularly, as we've been, focused on the gender inclusion for a couple of years, we know we need to show women in their multidimensional selves. Women are not just moms, they're not just professionals, they're not just coaches, they're all of those things. And the more we can show that aspect of, they're not just one aspect of them, but to show that multidimensional aspect, that is something that resonates well with consumers. When the woman is empowered and she's not just a supporting character in the ad, again, this is something that resonates well. Really challenging stereotypes and, being kind of provocative about kind of the stereotypes of what might typically be a female versus a male role. And then, showing her making progress and getting wins. So these are themes, no matter which brand, we have, that are the ones that are laddering up to developing more inclusive advertising that resonates better with, and it's not just female, honestly, when we do that, it actually is resonating better with men too, because it feels accurate.
And you can see that in the Carter's ads that they showed earlier today too. It hits everybody in the heartstrings. So that's what's next on your roadmap?
Sure. So we feel good about the progress we're making from a gender inclusion, but then 2020 happened and we realized gender is not enough, and we needed to be much more focused on thinking about how to do this for the multicultural consumer as well. And so we followed a very similar model of, again, you have to understand your current state. You have to understand where your opportunities, and honestly got some similar results to when we started with kind of our gender inclusion, which was, hey, we've got some stuff that's really well. We've got some brands who seem to resonate better or are portraying their consumers in a better way, in a more authentic way. And we've got brands that aren't. And so we've done the same thing, as really trying to kind of take those initial steps and start to build more knowledge into the organization about where we can be better, more knowledge around kind of our diverse consumers, doing more testing and learning and kind of scaling up as we go. So not as far in that journey, but definitely something that is a continued focus for us.
Out of curiosity, the team that you have employed, how are they in terms of diversity, and has this changed any of your hiring practices or recruiting practices?
Sure. So we actually have a fairly diverse team. I would say what it's done is these are things that are good for business. I mean, we're doing this because it's good for business, but it's the right thing to do. So it doesn't matter who it is on the team. It just feels good to know that you're doing this. And I think as we all know, it's a challenging environment out there for many different reasons. And, as we think about our employee experience and employees wanting to kind of work on your brands and work in your company, them understanding that this is important to us, is I think a big fulfillment driver for them and helps retain. And it is something that, again, helps us keep, when you're challenging unconscious, conscious bias in certain areas, it helps just bring it to light, I think, all the time. And I think you're just more aware of making sure that you're getting the right feedback. Do you have diverse kind of, what is it, diverse perspectives, diverse backgrounds, diverse ethnicities? Do you have that in the room when you're kind of challenging a problem or challenging, a new idea? And so I think it does kind of pervade other things that we do, which has been really important. Like I said, fulfilling, I think, for the team.
So you've got a room full of marketers here. Sure, they're sitting there thinking, man, I got to do more in this. What's your advice to them? How do they get started? How do they do more?
It's definitely a journey. I mean, we've been doing this. We've been on the gender inclusion journey for 3+ years, and a year and a half into really trying to do this in a more disciplined way from a multicultural standpoint. So it's not you get it, you solved it, and you're done. It's definitely a journey. And the first thing really is to take the first step and say, is this something that I think is important to me? Is it important to my organization? Do I think I can drive more value within my organization if we are more focused on this? And take that first step. Like I said, I know this topic is intimidating because it can feel scary, and you don't want to take a wrong step, but there's a lot of knowledge sources out there. Like I said, we partnered with the ANA. I'm sure there's been great brand innovator kind of conversations and discussions on it. I'm happy to talk to anybody about it, but but there's a lot of knowledge. And so you're not starting on this one alone. And so don't feel like you have to start, and don't start from scratch. But start with assessing kind of where you think you are, and then identify your biggest priorities. But no matter what, if you do kind of move forward in this area, identify a way to assess yourself ongoing. It may not be kind of the GEM measure that we used, or SIM, which is the multicultural measure, but find a way to assess so you can know, are we making progress? You can hold yourself and your teams accountable to what we're doing.
Are there any brands that you see that are doing a really good job that you look at and admire, or people that need to even do a little bit better than what you see today?
Sure. I won't talk about the people needing to do better. I'm not going to.
The Yeezy brand line probably needs a little help.
I won't go low. One brand, again, just because I've been involved in this for a couple of years, and I have a daughter who's 7. So again, this is something very, near and dear to my heart, is kind of thinking about how this can impact her when she gets older. I think Mattel has done a great job. Again, I loved Barbies when I grew up, but they were a very specific kind of stereotype of what women should look like and how they should be and how they should act and dress. And I love how Mattel's kind of embraced their role and aspiring young girls, and it's really changed their advertising and what they bring to life in their advertising, and how they're really helping girls envision kind of what they can be. But then they bring it full circle into the dolls. The dolls, you can get them in all shapes, sizes, colors. They are constantly bringing out dolls of women who have just done accomplished, amazing things and very accomplished. So again, helping, I think, little girls kind of visualize in a very different way kind of what normal is or what they can be. And so I've admired the way they've kind of really kept that thread through everything that they're doing.
Great. Anything else to share prior to moving on to some audience questions?
Oh, okay.
Awesome. Well, for starters, before we move on, just to recap, sounds like you are stepping into doing a lot of DEI and inclusive marketing. Best thing to do is to get started, figure out, where you're missing in the gaps, and make sure you start filling those, and just make sure that you're out there listening to your consumers to be able to personalize to them at scale. Is that fair?
Good.
Questions?
Great recap, Steve. You were listening.
So it's See Her, and you can find out more information. That's with the ANA, and the measure is GEM, or the gender equality metric.
To stand up because I'm a little shorter on this side. Thank you for touching on the topic of multicultural, because that's what our specialty is at the company I work for. We reach a Hispanic audience. But I really want to talk about is, what do you think, what does it take for your brands to be authentic? Right? That is the key word when you're tapping into a segment that is unknown, very super sensitive, depending on the audience you're reaching. So how do you become authentic in the space? When you're a new product, company, how do you reach that goal?
It's a great question, and I would say something we're still working on to make sure, again, that we're doing it right. One of the things we're doing is, and Steve touched on it, you have to learn, you have to be talking to your consumers, and not just, at a mass level, but really trying to think about it on a more personalized level. So continuing to kind of stay, connect and kind of hear directly from your consumers is one. I think the second is, one of the things that we've learned through all of this is really looking at our insights for our brands and our creative, and identifying, are we really building this based on human truths? Because we don't actually do like Hispanic specific advertising or multicultural specific advertising, but what we have found is that there's certain insights that are universal across different groups, and if you can tap into those, then you're still tapping into something very, very important to them. But then as you bring that to life, make sure that however you're going to bring that to life, that you are doing it authentically, and you're doing it appropriately, and hopefully doing it aspirationally. So, making sure if, again, environment, the characters, environment, who they're around, what they're talking about, how they talk, making sure that all of that feels appropriate. And that to me just comes from, I think, having diversity in the room, or diversity in the advertising agencies, or having some way to get good feedback from those consumers on, is that resonating or not? I mean, one of the biggest pitfalls we found is humor, is that there's, we'd have a bunch of people in the room who'd be like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. And then it just bombed when we, like, some of them, and the multicultural, we learned big time some missteps we were making with humor. So like that's, yeah, again, we found out where we need to be extra sure that we are getting diversity of feedback to make sure that we're hitting those notes right.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm with Edible Brands. And I think everyone in this room as brand marketers probably understands the importance of authentic representation. But not everyone in the organization might understand the importance of that, and some may be more focused on things like ROI. So can you talk about your experience, maybe share advice that how did you sell in making an investment to get a gender equality metric in your organization where it might not necessarily be an immediate tie back to ROI?
Sure, it's a great question. And the number one thing is doing the right thing for the consumer is the right thing for the business. I know it doesn't always, tie to exactly to the ROI, but it started with that. Is like, it's fundamentally, this is our consumer base. And if we're only speaking to this percentage of it, then we're not going to win long term. And I think the organization understood that. But again, there's also there's data out there that shows if you are showing aspirationally, if you're showing authentically, there is like higher claimed purchase intent for those brands, higher brand affinity, higher claimed purchase intent. And so that was some of the data that we were able to leverage to kind of start. And then once people had that assessment, because we had to pay for that first assessment of our historical advertising. Once we had that, then it became really clear of like, hey, we have work to do. And again, by building it into our normal practices, it was something that there was a little bit of incremental probably time and thought, but it was something that just became part of how we did business. And same with the testing. So we use Ipsos. Ipsos actually has a gender metric and a multicultural metric, at least the version that we're using right now. So there might be services that you're already leveraging that actually have some of this. And you may be able to get it at no or somewhat of an incremental cost. So we're definitely worth exploring. So I think it is good for business, and there's some good data points out there, and I'm happy to kind of follow up with you afterwards on those. And then once you identify the opportunity, I think it really helped rally the organization to say, hey, we can't ignore this.